Good morning, good afternoon, good night to everyone who is joining this webinar. We will give a couple of minutes for people to pour in, and we will begin very, very shortly. Again, good morning, good afternoon, good night to everyone who is joining our webinar. I think it is time to start getting started. So welcome to another monthly World Urban Parks webinar. Before we begin, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Alice Landon, Research Advisor for World Urban Parks. And on behalf of the World Urban Parks team, we want to thank you for joining us today. And we want to thank our speakers for giving us the time as well for this very fruitful conversation. As always, we love for our attendees to say hello. So while people start pouring in, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, write us from which organization, from which park you're joining from which city, from which country. We would love to know a little bit more about who you are. And before we start the webinar, I want to share some important announcements with you all. First, I want to remind you that this year's Global Parks Congress is being held as a joint event with Parks and Leisure Australia and supported by Green Adelaide. And it will take place in a little bit less than a month now in Adelaide, Australia from October 22nd to October 25th. This year, our Congress theme is Sustainable Places, Spaces, People, and Habitats. And the full program is already up on the website. You can see all of the speakers, all of the presentations. Registration is still open to the public. And I want to invite you all, if you can, and if you haven't got your tickets yet, to do so soon and see you in Adelaide. We will be there, at least I will be there. I hope all of our lovely guests will also be there. And we hope that we can continue the conversation in Adelaide. I also want to take the time to invite you all to listen to Pod Parks, our official podcast, where every Wednesday we have episodes supported by park experts from around the world. This week's episode is an exploration on coastal environmental management through park systems. And we got to chat with park managers in Seattle and park managers in Adelaide, Australia, about what some of these challenges and specific efforts are being done to regenerate coastal environments as parks. And as always, if you're not yet a member of World Urban Parks, we would like to kindly invite you to join our online community, to join our physical community of park professionals and park enthusiasts from around the world. Visit worldurbanparks.org to learn more. I'm going to put all of these links in the chat as soon as I am done speaking. So thank you for listening. And to start off the webinar, I want to remind everyone here that all of the contents and all of the recordings of this webinar will be uploaded to our online community. So if you're already a member, you have access to all of this material. And if not, it is extremely easy to join at worldurbanparks.org. We will also try to upload the slides. And if our presenters have any additional information to share, we will upload that as well. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the chat, the Q&A section, or the chat section if you don't know how to access a Q&A. And at the end of our presentation, our speakers are going to hold a dialogue and question space where we can continue this conversation. And with all of that being said, I would like to introduce today's moderator, Laura Milan from the Children, Play, and Nature Committee, who is going to lead this webinar session. Laura, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, thanks, Alice. As Alice said, my name is Laura Milan. I am the CSO for External Relations at the Children and Nature Network. We are a US-based nonprofit working to increase equitable access to nature everywhere children live, learn, and play. and I'm a member of the Children Play in Nature Committee at World Urban Parks. And I'm so pleased to welcome you and our expert panelists on this wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are joining us from. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm coming to you today from Minneapolis, Minnesota, homeland of the Dakota people who live and have lived here. They have lived on and cared for this land for thousands of years. And while the Dakota were forced to cede rights to this land through theft and violence by the United States government in 1851, this still is and will always be Indigenous land. Next slide, Alice, thank you. So today I have the great pleasure of moderating a panel of my colleagues from the World Urban Parks Children Play and Nature Committee, which works to share knowledge and advance best practices for creating access to play and nature-filled experiences for children around the world. If you are interested in this work, we welcome new members to our committee. If you'd like to join us, and we'd love to have you, please send an email to the email that I have up on the screen. It is office@worldurbanparks.org. Next slide. So let's get started. As you can see, our presenters are coming to you from around the world. We have Leticia Lozano, principal and co-founder of Masia Estudio in Mexico City. We will hear from Amawi Phillips, the cultural consultant for Mofra Foundation in Accra, Ghana. And we have Jenny Beach, who is associate professor at the Institute for Physical Activity and Nutrition at Deakin University in Melbourne, Australia. It's very exciting. They're amazing. They're all amazing. And for the first half of this webinar, our presenters are going to share examples of how urban parks can enhance the connection between nature and play, work that they've been doing. And for the second half, we'd like to have more of a dialogue with you, our attendees. So save up your questions and you can add them. The Q&A works great. It's along the bottom of your Zoom window. If you're not familiar with it, it looks like two little dialogue boxes. You can click on that and add your questions, or you can use the chat when we get to that point. So save up your questions. Next slide. Before we jump into the case studies, though, from our panelists, we thought we would share why the Children Play Nature Committee does this work. And what you'll see on screen is a statement from World Urban Parks, recognizing the important role that urban parks play in the quality of life of children and young people. And that statement is really backed by a significant and growing body of research. At the Children in Nature Network, we curate the world's largest collection of peer-reviewed literature on the benefits of nature. We have more than 1,300 studies now in our free online research library. You can access them anytime, and I hope you will explore that. And the link to that is also on your screen. Next slide. So all of this evidence that we've been curating, and my partners and my colleagues have been curating, tells us that play and nature they're a powerful combination, kind of the dynamic duo. We know that parks and natural areas can encourage imaginative, cooperative play that accommodates different ages, different abilities, and that really supports children's social emotional development. Next slide. And we know that parks and green spaces also support a wide range of interests and different types of play. You can see the different types on screen, ranging from dramatic to constructive to locomotor. All of these types of play are essential for helping children reach their full potential. Next slide. So we know that playing outdoors in nature makes children healthier, and all of these statements are science-backed. Again, you can explore our research library and these infographics that I'm sharing. Kids who spend time outdoors are more active, more physically fit, reducing the risk of obesity and chronic disease. Playing outdoors promotes core strength, balance, agility, development of gross motor skills, increases the likelihood that girls will remain active longer into adolescence. And the science is now really clear on this. Time spent in bright sunlight is required for the development of healthy vision. The rate of myopia, nearsightedness in children, has risen 25% over the past 40 years, and it is directly linked to kids not spending enough time outdoors. Next slide, happier. We know that playing in nature makes children and young people happier. Unstructured time outdoors in nature reduces stress, reduces anxiety, promotes positive moods, improves social functioning of children. We know that children playing in natural areas rather than built environments, they demonstrate more pro-social behavior and cooperative behavior, and lower levels of aggression. Outdoor recreation provides opportunities for kids to take risks, develop problem-solving skills, and build self-esteem. And we know that time outdoors in nature can be a proven antidote to the negative impacts of trauma and stress that children and teens are experiencing. Next slide. Playing and learning in nature helps improve academic outcomes, also science-based. Up one slide back, if you don't mind, Alice. Or just one slide ahead. There you go. Thanks. Regular physical activity, which tends to be greater in natural environments like parks, improves brain function in children. And when kids play and learn in natural environments, we see improved performance across all subject areas: reading, writing, math, science, social studies. And you'll find enhanced creativity, executive function, fewer behavioral problems, and increased engagement and enthusiasm for learning. Now, the next slide. And we also know that meaningful outdoor experiences inspire children to love and care for nature, and children who are connected to nature report higher satisfaction with their lives. So with that as our foundation, we'd like to welcome our first presenter, who will give us a great example of how this works. And we'll start with Leticia Lozano.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you, World Urban Parks, for the invitation. I'm very happy and honored to be here sharing the floor with my colleagues from the CPN committee. They are people I admire and whose work inspires me every day. As Laura said, my name is Leticia Lozano, and I'm the co-founder and director of Masia Studio. Next slide, Alice, that one, thank you. Where we transform cities hand in hand with children and their communities by creating experiences, new forms of participation, and places where they can live, learn, and play. I wanted to share a little reflection as to why it is important to dialogue about the importance of how urban parks can enhance this special connection between nature and play. Because what really shapes any connection we have as humans? This question sits at the inception of my practice because the experiences we encounter throughout our life, both positive and negative, and especially during our childhood, define our individual thoughts, feelings, and behaviors when we're adults. Think about it. What were those moments? Sorry, Alice, the before one. What were those moments that define what you are doing now? What do you care for? Unfortunately, those moments are very much defined by the environment in which we live every day. Now it's the next one. So for example, in Mexico City, where I work mostly, that can mean traveling 1 to 2 hours every day to attend a school near your parents' work. Or it can mean that the air pollution levels are so bad some days that they will have a long-lasting impact in your health. Or that the decision makers in your borough are so blind that they believe that they do a good job when they create this type of spaces on the air and noise pollution without public lighting, with so many blind spots that it is clear they design it from a desk without even visiting the space. The bird lottery plays a key role in who we become as adults. Our baselines are diverse and impact what we think about the planet's future, or if we think about it at all. Of course, this is not a justification, but it is more of a humble way to approach the importance of nature within urban context. Which brings me to this image. An image that tells a whole story, a story of how it is possible to transform people's interaction with nature, people's habits of interaction with nature. So this is the ravine of Tarango, and this was its condition when we were first invited to join this adventure. For these pictures to be taken, Estudio Abierto, the team that invited us, had already collected 117 tons of solid waste over the course of a year with only volunteers. The challenge that we were facing was not an easy task. We were joining a project that had timelines, many stakeholders, restrictions, and a latent desire to create recreational areas. the first thing that appeared after they cleaned up the area or the ravine was this football court. The neighbors created it right at the entrance. And I'm not going to start talking about the gender bias approach to public space in Mexico and in Latin American countries, because that would be a talk for another day. But it was evident, this was evidence that there was a need for a process to be in place that could integrate ideas and desires of all the members of the community. So how might we rehabilitate a natural space that was once regarded as a dumpster and transform it into a clean, accessible, and green space that could benefit the community's integral wellness? So we started by creating maps of the ravine with the community, because they know where, where the ground is lower or higher, where the fruit and vegetable trees are, and where the bees are hiding, and where it floods during, rainy season. Then, through an explorative walk, we identified the small pockets, the small spots where we could create interventions to activate the whole arm of the ravine. I should say that the ravine has many arms. This was just one. It has, I think it's up to 9 arms. This is just one. So through a series of images and drawings, we assemble a general idea of the types of experiences they were longing for. And the challenge then was on our side as an architecture studio. We needed to integrate all of the community's voices, be respectful to the environment because it was going through a healing process, abide by the rules because all of the government regulations came into place when the place was clean. And we needed to manage people's expectations because budgets and resources were very limited. So with the help of volunteers, people from the community, and of course, all of the stakeholders of the project, we designed a master plan with 7 interaction spots. Next slide, please. To create a natural trail to embrace compassion, contemplation, closeness with the community, and of course, play. Eventually, we had to narrow it down to making 3 a reality. Next one, a sandpit-like space to interact between generations. And I'm just going to show you a couple of images of how it was transformed. Next one. And the next one, a contemplation spot to reflect, hang out, or just enjoy the moment of being in this beautiful natural environment that was healing after being covered with rubbish. Next one. And a play space for all generations. So after 2 years in total and many, many tons of rubbish, the space was free. It was transformed by the children and their community to take advantage of their own skills. Most of the neighbors in this area work in construction or had abilities to help out. So the results were shown immediately. The space was appropriated by the community. A sense of belonging and pride arise from the beginning, and the play opportunities happen every day. Next one. So, gracias. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you want to find out more about Masia Studio, please visit masiastudio.com or send us an email to say hi. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Amawi Phillips, an amazing change maker from the Mofra Foundation.
Thank you, Letty. I hope everybody can hear me. My volume is fine. It's always a privilege to exchange experiences from the diverse places that are represented on our expert committee. Thank you again. I'm Amawi Phillips. I work in the civil society space as an urban play practitioner with Mofra Foundation in Ghana and Friends of Mofra in the United States. Both organizations advocate for cultural enrichment in urban spaces for children. I'd like to share a few practical examples from the environment that I'm most familiar with, which is the city of Accra in Ghana. But first, perhaps a little bit of context about the urban landscape there. Urban parks are very unevenly developed. So I'm inviting us to broaden our definition of the term urban park, because for us, it can range from well-designed public facilities to bare, open patches of land. Some parks might be green, but they're formal settings for national monuments, and so they're not very accessible for play. So overall, the institutional support system for playable urban spaces in my context, it's not very strong. What I've done is I've chosen a few examples to demonstrate how culture is a powerful element that can enhance the special connection between nature and play. Think of it as an activating agent, a sort of a yeast in the form of design and programming. In Ghana, popular traditions like what you see here, tumatu or hopscotch, or wari or mankala, and ampe, which is an outdoor game played mostly by girls, when these are embedded into or consciously programmed into the outdoor landscape, we find that everyone from small children to adults engages in play. Even when these games themselves don't involve a direct connection with a natural material or object, they serve as affordances which draw people into the park. And when they're there, they also benefit from the other aspects of being in an outdoor environment, the fresh air, the relaxation, and so on. In order to save time, I'll just ask you to bear in mind Laura's very helpful reminders of the overall benefits of nature play that she gave in the introduction to the webinar. So I've chosen these images because you can see in them the intensity of engagement and the joy between the different age groups who are playing together. There's an additional advantage to all of these affordances because they don't involve costly infrastructure. So here is the popular and very physical game of strategy called ampe, which can be played from childhood to adulthood and is very special and unique because it was developed by women and girls, and is one of those games that allows, women and girls to claim space within the outdoor environment. So culture serves us very well when there's programming to connect children with the adults whose work involves nature and natural elements. A few examples come to mind for me. For example, there is the painter who for a long time would come into the park that I work in unannounced as a volunteer, and he would just paint secret butterflies on rocks and tree trunks for children to find, and it was a really lovely intervention. This is an image where you see a play wall that's being repainted, and notice the detail on the mural accents. For example, the one on the left side of your screen is a form of storytelling about nature. That symbol is a fern. And so nature can always be an intentional reference point through a variety of symbolic and explicit messaging. Children can be involved in park installations like a rammed earth wall or a mud and bamboo structure. So you see how this hands-on engagement with natural elements, really has a strong and pleasurable impact on and for children. My favorite one is the next one, where filling hand-thrown clay pots made by women with earth, makes these pots available to us to use for sitting on, for climbing over, as storytelling spaces, etc. So programming, again, is key in organizing these nature-related encounters. In the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about the element of fascination. How do you put magic into an urban park? And here you can see that there is on your left left of your screen this gourd tree, which is at the center of Mofra Park in Accra. And it's a source of endless curiosity and fascination because of these huge green orbs. When those orbs are dried out and cut and scraped, then they become objects for loose parts play, which the children can immediately associate with that tree that they see in the same park space that they're playing in. Even when there are no trees or intentionally grown plants, there are resilient plants that are growing in unlikely places, and those can also have a lot of curiosity value, like this one. This is not the plant itself, but these are the seeds. And when they're exposed to moisture, they disperse with a very satisfying explosion that children love. So where I work, there are people who migrate to the city from the countryside, and these people are informal stewards and transmitters of urban green culture, and they really can play a role in urban park development and programming if they're given the necessary recognition and respect. So finally now, I just want to point out that urban parks can be designed to allow some natural elements like trees to complete their full life cycle. So you use them differently over time as they fall back into nature. For example, this uprooted tree, which we called This Old Log, was allowed to lie where it fell. And over years, it served as so many things, like a gathering space and site of physical play and discovery, and even in its final moments as a vertical garden. So I'll just stop here and say thank you very much. We move on now to Jenny, who joins us from Australia very early in her morning. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Amawi, and thank you very much for the opportunity to join with the panelists today. Great to be here, and it's really fascinating and wonderful opportunity to have a global perspective on this topic. So I'm a researcher within the Institute of Physical Activity and Nutrition at Deakin University in Melbourne, Australia. My research really investigates the role of public open space for providing opportunities for physical activity and social connectedness. My research is across the lifespan, but I have a particular focus on children and youth. And I've been researching in this space for about 20 years. So today I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of some research that we've been conducting in this space. So the first one is a study which was called Revamp, and what it was we evaluated the impact of a nature-based playscape installation on park visitation and physical activity. So that's why I'm presenting this one to you today, because it was a nature-based refurbishment playscape. It was in a very large park. It was 330 hectares, and we evaluated its impact compared to a control park, which didn't undergo any changes during the study period. It was a bit smaller, but it had very similar features to the intervention park at baseline. So this is what the park looked like before it was refurbished. The images are on the left. You can see it mainly included walking paths and a very basic, very basic playground. Primarily it was open spaces and a few picnic shelters. The images to the right show the refurbishment and how it was changed. So the design was really to ensure that there was opportunities for people to connect with nature, and there was significant Indigenous stories, local flora and fauna incorporated into the design, as well as play equipment. There was nature-based elements that children could use. There were lots of sculptures and some climbing equipment. Next slide. This is an overview of the maze area. And you can see that the incorporation of the landscaping into the playscape. And here we have some other images of sort of the play equipment area and some of the sculptures. So it was primarily designed for younger children. So we went into both parks at 3 time points before the park was refurbished, which is called T1, and then 1 year after, T2, and then a following year after that at T3. And we took very large teams of staff, as you can imagine, when we had to count the number of people in 330 hectares. And we conducted scans every hour from 8:30 to 4:30 on 4 weekdays and 4 weekend days. And we recorded people according to their age group and also to their activity levels, whether they were sitting, standing, moderate or vigorous physical activity. We also collected about 3,000 residential surveys from people living within 3 kilometres of both parks, and 3,000 surveys were completed within the park. So if we have a look at the number of visitors that were visiting the park, that relative to the control park, we found we observed 176% increase at the intervention park. So this is a very large increase. Most of this increase was observed among children and a smaller increase among adults. But this is a really significant result. If we have a look at the results on the right, that's in relation to physical activity. And there was more than 120% increase really across the time points relative to the control park. And once again, this was primarily due to the increases in activity among children and adults. Interestingly, there was no significant change observed for adolescents or older adults. And in Australia, we do find that these 2 age groups are the age groups that are observed, less often in our parks, and it is a challenge to get them to really be visiting our parks. So even though this playscape was primarily designed for younger children, we still observe no real changes for these age groups. The results I just gave you were for the overall park. If we have a look at just the playscape, there was a more than 600% increase in the number of visitors observed. So that would increase from 132 to 1,016 over our observation days. So you can see that really providing this nature and really attractive nature-based environment can really have a huge impact. We have produced almost 10 academic publications from this study, and infographics and summary reports, and also a video. So if you'd like more information, please contact me. We've produced these dissemination materials so that it's easier for people involved in park planning and management to access this evidence. And the next study I just wanted to quickly talk about was called Project Park. And the aim of this study was to identify the relative importance of park features to attract visitors to park, and also encourage them to be active and social in the park. And we did this with children, teens and older adults. And really the purpose was to really hear their views and to find out from them what was the most important features to really attract them to be in the park. So it was a very comprehensive study over 4 years. First of all, we did about 100 interviews where we walked through 9 different parks in Melbourne and asked them what they liked and what they didn't like. And then we about 1,000 participants rated photos of park features to find out what was most important. And then the final phase was about 1,000 people again did another survey where we identified the relative importance. And obviously the data we collected is very extensive, but today I just really wanted to show you on the right that the most important features that emerged for children were adventure type equipment, but they also wanted nature elements. So it's really important to combine the challenge and the adventure equipment with the nature. And for teens, the results were a little bit different. They were also wanting the nature, but some more opportunities for other type of sports corp or established fitness type equipment. But for older adults, the presence of nature is critical in that, really peaceful aesthetic environment. So the role of nature is critical not only for children, but for also teens and older adults. So I just wanted to highlight that quickly. And once again, we do have summary sheets that are very user-friendly if you would like to find out more about this study. So that was just two examples that I wanted to highlight today, and you'll find my email at the top there if you would like to contact me. Thank you very much. I'd just like to now hand back to Laura, and we'll open it up for questions.
Thanks, Jenny. And thank you also, Letty and Amawi. That was amazing and inspiring as always. It's always so good to spend time with you. It's my favorite committee, I think, that I've ever been involved with. And thanks to everyone who's with us today attending. We'd like to have this next section. We have about 20 minutes to be more of a dialogue, both between our presenters and also between you as attendees. If you have questions or thoughts that you'd like to share, maybe we'll get the ball rolling by just all three of you have just shared bodies of work that are really inspiring. And I was really taken by, Leticia, your approach with your studio around creating playful cities, and Amawi, really the joy that you captured in some of those photos. And Jenny, you're just talking about transforming open space, which is also lovely, but into spaces that really encourage adventure and play. We know how important it is to engage children and youth in helping us plan those kinds of spaces and those kinds of experiences. You just shared that in your research, Jenny. But maybe I'll start with you and just, was there anything new or unexpected that you've learned? We all know the importance, but anything new or unexpected you've learned through this work about the importance of engaging youth or how to do that effectively that might inform our attendees and me?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. That was the whole purpose behind Project Park, was because, we knew from our natural experiment work, such as the revamp study that I showed, that, by changing a park or refurbishing it can make a difference. But we really wanted to know, what are the most critical features to include in these refurbishments so that we make, the biggest difference we can, and so that the parks that we build are the best that they can possibly be and really meet the needs of the different people using these spaces. And that was the whole purpose of Project Park, because, a lot of times, especially in Australia, and I know globally in other countries as well, that the voices of the people using the park are just not heard. What's important to them from the children's perspective is not really considered. And so it's so critical that we understand really what they want, and then actually listen to what they say and ensure that what they want is actually provided in our redevelopments or our new place spaces. And it's not always easy to do that. And that's why, I guess, we undertook this study, because we thought this was a really, good opportunity to hear their voices and make sure that, we do it in a really structured and in-depth way. And I know that's not possible in many places to do such research, but if we can really ensure that each time, you may be considering redeveloping a park or planning a park, that you really, give this a really key attention, that you involve not only, it's not only children, but it's the teens, it's, it's older adults, it's people from different areas and different demographic groups, different cultural groups, as Amawi's pointed out, different genders. So we really need to listen to all our user groups to make sure that they're really meeting the needs.
Thank you. Amawi, I'd like you to just to follow up on that as well. Kind of anything unexpected or something different that you learned about this work that we know is so important.
Oh, sure. So we've experienced several different kinds of methodology in involving children, particularly, you know, in the maybe 9 to 15, you know, age group, and listening to them, as Jenny says, really listening to them with care. But one thing I'd like to add is that I think sometimes there's an over expectation of what younger children can contribute in terms of what they say or what they draw. Sometimes in our context, their exposure is not that great, and they may not have a lot of model parks even to think about. So they may say things like, oh, we'd like a swimming pool, big swimming pool. I mean, that's not even possible. But I think to get around that, observation is the key. The way in which children contribute is by doing things in spaces, and our job is to observe them and document what it is they do, and then incorporate that into the planning as their contribution.
Thank you so much. We have a question from one of our attendees, and I'm going to direct this question first to Leticia. What are some of the challenges you have found in creating these nature-based play transformations like you did in the ravine?
We need another hour for this. I think we found, like, you know, in Mexico and in Mexico City, the restrictions are and challenges are always budget-based. Always, like, as I said in my presentation, like for example, in the ravine, once the ravine was clean, and, you know, every volunteer came, and we, you know, after sweat and tears and blood, like 117 tons of waste, like that's trucks and trucks and trucks of rubbish. And then the government came and was like, oh, we have all of these regulations, and you cannot do this and you cannot do that. And it's like, dude, you didn't even come to help us clean, you know? So sometimes you're trying to work with the community, and you have all of these people that are, like, you know, really making an effort, and then you face a wall when trying to invite decision makers. That's another one. And the other one is sometimes, and most of the time, adults tend to think that children's narratives and their voices are not important. Even the parents, even the teachers, like, it's like I've heard so many parents say, like, oh, but why did you ask them? Like, they don't know. Or, you know, I've heard decision makers say, like, oh, but, like, if you're gonna go to that dodgy neighborhood, like, you want to, like, put something, like, not so nice, so then children don't break it. So it's a lot of this adult-centric mind. I think that is our biggest challenge. How do we arrive to that intervention? So there was a lot of, you know, lobbying, a lot of talks, a lot of dialogue, a lot of showing examples of change, a lot of, like, you know, grabbing data from other people, because in Mexico we don't even have the budget to do the research that Jenny does, for example. So it is important for us that in other countries as well are showing, like, oh, this is the research, this is the impact. And then if we have the chance to get some budget, applying that to get the data, that hard data that changes people's minds, and then one project at a time, then you have to be creating your data to showcase for other projects and to show that it is possible. To be honest, there are so many, and every project presents another new one that we don't know. So that one, the most recent one, and I would like to share it because I was talking about it a little bit before. So we're working in a rural area, and where many, you know, many dads work in construction, and because of the environment, they are teaching their sons, whom are very little, from like a very little, like the very small, like say 7, 8 years old. So the dads are teaching them the abilities to work in construction, right? And sometimes that leads for children to stop going to school. And then when we're doing this, this projects and this construction and this transformation, they are involved, and they're involved in the construction process. And they have so many abilities that for us is amazing to be looking at them, but we don't want to fall into the romanticizing that they have these abilities to give to the project. So it's a big question. I don't have the answer, but the challenge is where is the blurry line of how much can children participate? Can they carry bulks of cement or should they only put grass, or should they only paint? Like that type of, those are the type of challenges that we face. So I hope it was a kind of clear image.
Yeah, and that is really a good segue to another question in the chat from one of our attendees. You're addressing it, and Jenny, you spoke to it in your research. Amalia, you did it as well. So maybe we'll start with Amalia and then Jenny. Suggestions to really ensure, it sounds like what you're saying, Letty, is appropriate level of participatory process, but how do we ensure participatory processes that include children without an adult-centric gaze? So I wonder if, Amal, you'd like to tackle that, and then Jenny. You've all touched on it a little bit.
Yes, I lost you for a little bit there, but I think you were asking, how do we engage children without an adult-centric gaze?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is the question.
Well, I am the one who suggested that we observe. So I guess observation in a sense is an adult-centric gaze, but you have to do it really thoughtfully and discreetly, so make sure that you're not sort of standing there and having children be self-conscious. There's just sort of ways in which you can do this discreetly and still get the benefit of observing the children in their, own sort of, spontaneous, and natural actions. So it really depends on the outcomes that you're looking for, and how you position yourself in relationship to the children. And I agree very much with Letty that in the culture I work in, the adult gaze can be very intense, and children's actions and words can either be dismissed or even suppressed, just, oh, you're a child, and the adult is. So it's really, I think that question is raising the very, very important issue of being super conscious about children's importance in this work and these environments, and they're looking for ways and a variety of strategies to use in elevating them, in comparison to, with the adults can do their work later, right? But I think it's one of the learnings that we have had is like just to communicate to people that children must be heard in whichever way works best.
Thank you. Jenny, is there a research or a data approach to this question? I'm thinking of the way you did your research with different age groups. Is there a way that you think about this from the research side?
Yes, I mean, one way is obviously approaching children or teens when adults aren't present, such as in the school setting, so when they're, free, or, they don't have the influence of the adults as such. I mean, they might have teachers, but not parents as such present. I mean, obviously, ideally, it's talking one-on-one with the children or the teens, which is what we were able to do in Project Park. But I mean, I know that's not always possible, but maybe it can even be like in group settings such as focus groups or such that you can have with children, without the adult present. But I mean, we do lots of work also with adults present, and we don't really find that to be too much of a problem. We still seem to be able to hear the children's voices without any interference as such, I guess, from the adults. But there's certainly lots of ways to broach this. It's just been, I get thoughtful and thinking about it, you know, beforehand when you're planning. Yeah, planning how to involve children. Yeah. And often it's nice to hear, sometimes it's nice to actually involve the parent, because they might suggest something and then that might encourage the children to think of something else. So it's good to think of, you know, it in lots of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. There is another question from an attendee, and I think we can probably maybe all address this in the time we have left. It's really interesting. They're thanking you for your presentations and just asking, they're saying, I'd love to know more about the gender perspective in these projects. How did they come into play, and what have been some of your observations? How can we go forward? There's a lot in that question, but would anyone raise their hand to tackle that first? I think this is one that I'd love to hear all of you respond to. I think we've got time for that. Anyone want to tackle that first?
I guess I can go first.
We all have so much to say about that.
How about we go the order of the presentations? That makes it simple.
That sounds good. We'll go with Letty and then Amawi. That sounds great.
So I think that's very important, because when we are creating spaces with nature, nature helps to balance out how children, well, how boys and girls play. Whereas if you're providing soccer, sports courts, or skate parks, that usually they're usually targeting boys, or at least that is boys and teenage boys, and that is the situation in the Mexican context. I do know it is different in others, so I think as Jenny and Amawi were saying before, you have to take into consideration the children's voices. You have to listen to them, but you also have to make sure that even your process comes from a non-gender bias perspective. So there's so many steps before going into the, you know, the participation process, and then also trying to talk with decision makers for them to understand how a space with, again, sports courts only is talking to boys. And I'm not denying that there are girls that like to play sports and all of that, and it's amazing that we have that now, but I think we don't need to be focusing on making just one sport or one way of playing out there. So we need to create a diversity for people that don't, you know, identify with the first one. Then we can go all the way down to the ZYZ option. So then we have a diversity for everyone, and that gives us a more diverse experience of our cities. I'll go to Amawi.
There's so much I could say about this, but I agree with Letty entirely that if you're looking, especially in the informal play environment, that it's usually boys and soccer that dominate in the cities in Ghana. But this is one of the things that I'm so proud of with the projects that we have done, because from conception of the spaces to the building and construction of them to the playful engagement, and we've had all genders, you know, involved in it. And I particularly want to focus on women and girls, because they tend, you know, to be pushed out of these spaces more. So there's been engagement of women and girls throughout, you know, with the building of things. We've had one woman who is an architect, and who has actually invented a new material for building out of coconut husk and resin. You know, she came and did a project there, involved other people. There's a muralist, a master muralist who has been there from a village in Ghana, put this sort of beautiful murals on the walls. But for those of our people who've been engaged who are women, when they're in charge of the oversight of building and construction, sometimes they found that there's a blockage there because men are not used to taking instructions from women. Especially they view as younger women. And so they've really had to, we've had to be very careful about recognizing that this can be an issue for them, and just to make sure that it doesn't get in the way of work getting done. And then just one example that comes to mind about engagement is with inclusive programming, where we've had families living with disability coming to our park space, and it's usually the mothers who have the charge and the care of their children with disabilities, mothers and siblings, actually. So to have that group come to a park space, be able to, literally put their cares down, for a few hours and engage in, Zumba on the grass or things like that. It's really wonderful to see. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amawi. Jenny, do you want to take that as kind of our closing answer, and then we'll wrap up?
Yeah, obviously I, agree with everything that has just been said. And I think it's really important to recognise, and we've certainly found in our research over the years that, boys and girls and use the spaces differently. And this goes across not only from children, but right through to older adults. So, we need to consider their needs and understand the different ways they use the space, both physically and also in terms of their social interaction, because we know that there's many reasons why people will visit these places. And so it's understanding who's using the places and who's not using the places, and how we can get those who are not using the places to use them, which is, critical, and making these precious places, as attractive and appealing to all our user groups in the community. So I guess that's the key point, is understanding, who is and who isn't using it, and how we can get those who aren't using it to use it more, and making it more attractive for those who are already using it. And there's lots of work to be done, but we're making great progress, and it's great to be working together on this to create great nature-based places for our communities.
It is indeed wonderful to be working together with all of you and with the Greater World Urban Parks community. And we are at time. And I think, just for anyone who's joined us, in the top of the chat, Alice had shared some links to different things for World Urban Park Congress and the Park Podcast and other information that you can find there. As I mentioned earlier, our committee welcomes new members. If you'd like to work with these incredible women that I just got to moderate, you're welcome to reach out and join us. You can do that by emailing office@worldurbanparks.org. And we would love to have you join us and learn more about our work. And with that, I would just like to extend a very sincere thank you to our panelists for sharing these incredible projects, this incredible work, and to Alice for facilitating and helping us out today in the back end. Thank you so much, Alice, for running our PowerPoints and getting us all set up. And thanks to all of our attendees. Thank you for spending your time with us, taking time out of your busy days to join us in this conversation. And don't hesitate to check out the Children, Play, and Nature Committee on the World Urban Parks website. And I'm going to hand it back to Alice in case there's any other closing details.
Well, for starters, I would just like to thank you all again. Thank you, Amawi, Letty, Jenny, and Laura, for joining us today, for taking the time from your busy schedules to share some of your knowledge with us. This has been a fantastic webinar. For those who are just joining us or those who joined late, remember that all of this information, the webinar recording, our slides, and any additional information that our speakers would like to share with us will be available in our member platform within a couple of hours. So you can find that there. You can also get in touch with all of our speakers through our member directory. So if you're not yet a member, I think this is a fantastic time to invite you to do so. And I do believe that we do have a new free trial if you want to explore our member platform. Again, thank you all so much. Thank you for everyone who joined our webinar and for everyone who's listening to the recording. And we hope you have a great rest of your month.